Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with our guest host, Frank Abbruzzese, and we thought we'd have a conversation on networking. So, Frank, how are you doing?
Doing great today. Thanks so much for inviting me again. Looking forward to it.
My pleasure. So I thought this would be an interesting conversation for us to have, as networking is a topic of conversation that I often get asked about. I mean, my background is a little bit more introverted and shy, and then I had to kind of grow into the skill set of networking. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about your kind of relationship to networking and what does networking mean for you over the years. So tell us a little bit about you and networking.
Absolutely. So networking I started doing about midway through my career, and I find that with the digital world, especially the last couple of years that we turned virtual, it's really helped and created some challenges in some ways. I'm really enjoying the back to in-person networking events, and I find that meeting people in person, exchanging business cards, sharing stories has been a lot of fun that I kind of missed in the virtual world.
Sounds good. And I wonder if you can take us kind of back in time, like what was kind of the first or like maybe first memorable networking experience that you have, and how did you kind of realize the importance of that at that point? So that first memorable networking moment, what do you think that was?
Well, I've got two non-traditional stories to share with you on networking. One is I'm not a handyman at all, and a friend of mine asked me to help him reshingle his roof, and I met another gentleman. And at the end of the day, when we had our burger and beverage, he said to me, "You seem like a really cool guy. What do you do?" So I told him my story, and he asked for my business card. And about 8 years later, he purchased a business. He called our company, and he did all his IT with us. So there you go, networking on the roof for a handyman job. You just never know where you're going to meet someone. The other one is here in Windsor. You know, we love our Spitfires. We have a OHL hockey team. And in the they made the Crown Royal Lounge for kind of like the business side of the fans that go out. So I always ran into this gentleman. Didn't really know if he knew me or not, but I thought, hey, why not connect on LinkedIn, say hi to him? And and a year went by, 2 years went by. I actually counted. I sent out 6 messages through LinkedIn in 2.5 years, and he responded once by saying, "I have no idea what your team does, but I know one thing, our teams need to get together." And then he moved his entire IT business to us. He was joking, of course. And to me, that was just thrilling to be able to, network in personal settings. So it doesn't have to be a very structured, formal networking. I kind of wanted to share that with the audience, that let's not get caught up in like there's a script and structure and, there's some of that protocol, but keep your eyes open wherever you're at. You just never know opportunity is going to run.
For sure. I was chatting with someone where we were talking about ABN, always be networking, that sort of thing, where you never know. And it's one of those things in networking where really you never know. So that person that you're having beverages on the roof or whatever after reshingle the burgers and all that, like they could be something. And what I think is important for folks to take away, it might not be now. Like that one was 8 years later, and then they found you. So actually, would you mind kind of delving a little bit more about that? Where is it really just that one happenstance occasion, or did you stay connected over the years, over that 8 years, or was there just a lot more serendipity to that?
With both, we've stayed connected over the years, and once you build that connection, it's up to both parties to go both ways. So I found when we're making that connections and we want to build a relationship, there's effort. So you need to make the effort. The 2.5 year one, I made the effort 6 times. I didn't get discouraged. I didn't give up. They were non-intrusive. How are things going? How's the summer going? Happy holidays. Hope all's well with you and the family. How's business going in the spring? It's just a touch point. And marketing, if you take a look at a lot of different studies, how many times do messages have to get in front of individuals or companies before they actually take you serious, that they get the message, they actually see it? So again, there's a lot of studies on the different marketing. I think networking is the exact same way. It's unrealistic to walk into a group for the first time, hand out all your business cards, and expect to make connections and make business and quote and go see people. You have to do some work. and it's going to be a bit of challenges. And I would love to hear people's challenges and help them walk through them, because we've been through a lot and we still face a lot of challenges, and we're helping each other.
For sure. In my circles, I know networking gets a little bit of a bad rap, right? It kind of is this kind of sleazy thing where people don't like, and especially if you're on my side of the fence, we're a little bit more introverted and reserved. You don't want anything to do with that. But I like to rebrand it as like building meaningful connections, where if you actually care for the person on the other side, and as a person that might be a friend that you haven't yet spent enough time with, that sort of thing, then that relationship can evolve a little bit more and a little bit more meaningfully, versus the kind of like the traditional like sleazy car salesman is like, hey, can I buy you something, or can you buy something from me? I think that is the traditional mindset, but I think people are actually coming to where with things like LinkedIn and what have you, there are networking has evolved over the years, I guess, to change a little bit. So could you talk a little bit about some of the evolution for networking on your side? So has there been kind of changes throughout the years, or has there been learnings throughout the years that you've started to internalize and use more and more?
Absolutely. First, your comment on the introvert. I think a lot of us are naturally introverts. I know I am myself. That's my nature, that's my upbringing, that's who I was, and then you kind of learn to deal with that. Evolving over network, there's let's talk pre-COVID. We had a lot more networking events that came up over the years, more associations, more business, more service organizations that seemed to come out, and it seemed like here in Windsor, Essex, anyways, they're from Monday to Thursday, you could have went to a networking event almost every single afternoon or evening, and sometimes breakfast meetings. During COVID, things kind of started a little bit virtual, and then they evolved to kind of disappearing after a while. If you're about a year into it, there really were no networking events virtually that we were well aware of that were on a regular basis. There were some going on. And what I found, I was Reflect Boxing Week, kind of take a look at what's happened in the year. And that last week in December of 2020, I made a decision to start a brand new virtual group called Wednesday Wisdom, and we ran it virtually every Wednesday from 11 till noon. And we were getting about 45 people on every week, which is kind of nice. And now we've evolved to going monthly in person again. And, your local chambers are always nice. The Windsor Essex Chamber is great having events. Those are Leamington one out in the county in Amherstburg. The chambers have great networking events, and I highly recommend, whether you're a member or not, consider being a member, but you can attend the events, and that's great networking. They're usually once a month, the after business ones. I strongly recommend to do those. Those have restarted again, and I think we're going to find a lot of, if you haven't experienced it yet, a lot of the golf tournaments, the charity drives are happening again. They're running way into September this year. And then the galas for a lot of the nonprofit organizations, seeing a few. And then I think next year we're going to see that evolve to get back to a lot more charitable galas. And again, I encourage you to go out to those events. You're supporting a good cause, and you're also meeting a lot of people that you would love to have in your contact list if you don't have them yet.
Sounds good. So what I took from that is obviously COVID changed anything that was in person, right? And you were able to set up something, the Wednesday Wisdoms, where you got a bunch of people together and then continued that post-COVID as well. And now, given that, knock on wood, things continue to open up, then there's more and more people getting out for golf tournaments, charity drives, and what have you. So it's definitely starting to be back to regular for networking. But for those that are kind of like starting out, right? So they start to understand, yes, networking is important, and it's something that, I haven't really done much of. What would be some of your tips for those that are trying to get started in the whole networking world?
So the first place I would start is LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn, anyone that's listening to this podcast, I strongly recommend taking a look at LinkedIn. You need to be on LinkedIn to build your professional network today. It's probably the best tool. There's a lot of great tools, but it's probably the best tool for networking.
Right.
Reach out and connect with the people that you know, your customers, your suppliers, your family and friends that are in business. Reach out to them and just connect with them. That's the first step. Secondly is get out and attend some events in person, or if they're virtual, attend them. when a company is having a session, a lot of times they're complimentary. You can hop on, and a lot of times you can see the audience. You can private message with the audience. You can take down names and companies, and you can add them to your network. So what I would do is, if John Smith was on from ABC Corp, I would connect on LinkedIn. And if they connected with me, I would say, John, nice to meet you virtually. I enjoyed the session. This was one of my takeaways. It was nice to see you on there. What takeaway did you have? So I'm going to kind of circle back to the beginning of our conversation when we're, building the relationships. The key is there's no selling. So if I reach out to John and say, hey, I got an IT company and I got a blue light special. It's going to be expiring at 5 o'clock today. You got to buy this. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be sold, right? So I find that in networking, a lot of times we're very anxious to not just tell our story, but to sell. There's no selling when you're meeting individuals at the beginning. It's build that relationship first. The roofing and the Spitfire scenarios that I shared, those are building relationships. There was no selling ever involved. They're the ones who came and asked, can you help? I bought a business. Can you help? We need a second opinion. So people love to buy from people that they know and trust.
Right.
People don't like to be sold by people that they know and don't know.
Right.
There's a big difference there. If you can have a nugget to take away, I would write that one down. People love to buy from people that they trust.
Right.
Think about that. It takes time to build that trust, to build that relationship. So that's my big tip for someone that's just starting out in networking.
Yeah, so I think what I took away from that is, you don't have to become kind of like that sly, charismatic person that kind of slides in and was able to carry on a conversation and wow them with all their experience and stuff. It's really about nurturing that relationship, right? Starting with something, getting to really build that trust so that at some point, and it may not be for 8 years in your case, that's something, and it may not be for forever, right? And it might be that you can help them or they can help you because it can go both ways. So it's not necessarily that they have to be a client to be sold. It could be that, well, maybe you buy services from them because you realize that they have value to provide. So it's a two-way street in there. So for the LinkedIn part, there's all sorts of resources out there where at least start with your profile, get something out there, and then learn a little bit and get a little bit better. In-person events or even the virtual events. I think I like what you mentioned where even in a virtual event, take a note of whoever's there because one of the challenges with virtual events is you don't really get to like exchange the business cards and stuff like that, right? There's a speaker, a panel, and then like 50, 100, 1,000 people in the audience. And unless you purposely go out and message any one of them, then you might not have an opportunity there. But then it goes kind of off the platform or off the meeting session and then building it over time. So building those relationships, I think, is very helpful. And I like to use the analogy of farming versus hunting. Right. Too many people, when they network, they hunt, right? Versus, well, let's nurture it. Like give it some soil, water, fertilizer, and all that sort of stuff. And in 8 years, 2 years, whatever it is, then, here's some fruit. Here's some whatever.
Usually not 8 years.
Well, hopefully it doesn't take that long. But I guess it's really up to the person and how quickly that they can build that trust and right. Really demonstrate their values, I think, what it ends up being. So if folks wanted to go about improving their networking, so what are some of the lessons that you've learned over the years? So obviously it's building the relationships. Are there other things that you would suggest for folks to improve their networking skills as well?
Sure. So when we're networking, it's really important to ask the other person for their story and to focus on when they're talking. So actively listening is a challenge. In the virtual world, a lot of cameras are not on. We see people that are checking their email, checking their phone. So, you're in the spotlight, you're on camera, undivided attention to what's going on. That'll make a huge difference. Secondly is asking them for their business card if you do it in person, or in the virtual world, you can either use the chat or you can email them if they show their email, but ask for their contact information so you can follow up with them through LinkedIn. Right. And the biggest thing on networking is when you meet people, if you collect business cards, you're collecting these email addresses, connect on LinkedIn and then send a message, or if they're not on LinkedIn, send an email. It was nice seeing you, nice meeting you at the event last night. I really enjoyed hearing your story about what you do. And then a lot of us like to follow up with a coffee chat or a phone call or an in-person meeting. So there's always another step to strengthen the relationship, again, without selling. If they ask, can you tell me what you do, or do you think you can help my company? Then you can kind of move into a bit of that, the sales process. But I would wait until that invitation or until you've developed a bit of a rapport. Another part about networking is, there's a number of connections that we have that will never do business, have never done business, but yet they're big supporters. They'll promote you. They'll give you referrals. They'll mention your name. They'll call you and say, my friend's business needs help. Can you please help them? So keep that in mind. Just because we're not doing business or just because we did business doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. You're not going to get referrals. Networking is all about making that connection and how you can help them and how they can help you. And it's not always, a direct transaction. I've enjoyed, been involved in a lot of different connections that have sent out referrals and opened up a lot of doors that, take a little longer if you were traditionally. So that's what I would, to sum up, I would definitely ask to share the story, listen attentively, and follow up with a message of some sort. Pleasure meeting you, and enjoy it and personalize it to show to them that you do care and that you were listening, because that's going to make a huge difference and an impact on that person when they read it.
It's a lot of great advice, because I know a lot of folks who will do networking events and what have you. It's like, well, did you get any contact information? What? Was I supposed to actually do? I thought I was just supposed to meet people. So once they get that, then I find it's the follow-up, right? So yes, you met with them, but what about in 4 months, 4 years, 8 years? Like if you have a little bit of that persistence, then that kind of shows that, hey, you're actually interesting to me, not just as a transaction. You can actually build that relationship. And then to your point about like the coffee chat, so yes, virtual is great, but being able to speak to someone one-on-one, even if it's through Zoom or a virtual call or whatever, that is great. And then the in-person ones obviously strengthen a little bit more. And I love what you said about that. The people you network with, it's not necessarily just them. It's the people that they know too. So they might not buy from you, but they might know plenty of people that do, or they might support and promote your services or whatever it is to their own network, and that can be just as valuable as someone who actually buys from you or what have you. So I think that's a lot of great information.
Thank you.
I'd love if you chatted about kind of networking in kind of the post-COVID world, right? So we're starting to open up. Some are getting back into in person. Some are still virtual. So there's kind of a mishmash of everything. What have you been seeing, and what are maybe some trends and kind of the future of networking? Have you seen anything else come up now that the world is slightly different now?
Yeah, it certainly is. I think we're going to continue the hybrid model. It's going to be virtual and in person. There's different organizations that are, forcing the workforce to go back to the office, so that becomes in person. Other organizations like AlphaKor are giving full flexibility on the hybrid. So I don't really think we're going to go either way in the short term. I think for the next couple of years, we're going to continue to see that. Technology is at a point where if you didn't have it 2 years ago, you definitely embraced it, and you've learned how to go virtual. So that's happening. The other pieces that will continue is, joining a business group and joining an association, volunteering on a board, or helping out a nonprofit organization. You'll find that when you get involved in these organizations out there, it's a feel good. You're making a difference. You're helping. You're supporting a good cause. And you're also meeting a lot of people that have similar philosophies that enjoy helping other people. And what happens when you get a group of people that enjoy helping other people? You tend to help each other. It's just a natural course of networking. And I have found the many boards, associations, the volunteer help that I put on, that has built a beautiful connections that have opened up a lot of doors. And the nice thing is I didn't have to ask, can you introduce me to that person? It just tends to happen naturally. In the conversation, once they get to know you, they know your personality, they know what you're about, and they know how you can help. They will say, hey, you know what? There's a person on the board that you do know. Let's set up a lunch meeting and make an introduction. And it's very powerful when you have that third party endorsing you. So those connections, don't take them lightly, because if they're not going to help you today, if you keep that relationship going, you just never know what might happen tomorrow. You might end up on a board with them, and then they'll get to know you a little bit more from those monthly meetings, for example, and all of a sudden they'll say, hey, I've learned something about this person I really didn't know, and I have something here. And I've seen that happen with my own eyes, not just with me, but with some of my peers. So I throw that out there to put on that volunteer hat, and you'll find you'll meet a whole different group of people that will definitely be a great way to network.
For sure. And what I took from that is, I mean, with the quote unquote new world, they're still going to be in person, they're still going to be online, so all the traditional stuff is there. I love what you said about volunteering, where in my experience, volunteering is probably one of the best forms of networking, right? Because people actually get to see you in action. You're there because you want to be there, not because you have to be there. And hopefully you're getting things done and connecting, and they can see your ability to deliver, and they get to know you a little bit more in that context as well. And I also want folks to also think about with evolving technology, there's more platforms. So although we talk about LinkedIn very heavily, there are more out there. So I know there used to be, well, I don't know how big it is now right now, but it's like Clubhouse and like, I don't know, there's a lunch, like a lunch one, lunch club is one. And then there's things like, I don't know if you've heard of like Shaper, which is apparently like a Tinder for professional connecting or something like that, where you swipe left and swipe right. So there's all these new ones. Some of them are a little more like fads and what have you. But take a look at them, because there might be different people, and usually the ones that are on there early are the ones that are actually interested in connecting, and then other people follow because they realize that there's value. So take a look at all those different areas of possibility for the future of networking and trends and things like that. So I think that was a great conversation on networking, to kind of get people's feet wet, where it's more than just the transaction. It's really building relationships and meaningful connections and things like that. And are there any other kind of words of wisdom or tips and tricks that you'd want to share with other folks in regards to networking and developing these relationships?
Sure. Besides being an introvert, I always hear about, well, I'm not sales, I don't need to network, or I don't like selling, aggressively. So the secret to sales is none of us like being a salesperson, but yet all of us, every single one of us, is in sales, professionally and personally. So I had to be sold to come on the podcast to make it worth my time and to provide you some nuggets. And you had to sell me to come on to here. So we had to sell it to each other, if you want to use the word sales loosely. So again, let's not sell when we're networking. Let's networking. Let's care about people. Today, more than ever, what's happened in the last 2.5 years, I've said it from the beginning when we went into this pandemic. We did a number of things. We set up interactive conversations with me Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons. We did the suddenly remote out of the gate that the chamber adopted that formula. We genuinely set up time and energy and resources just to help people, not on the transaction side of it, just to listen. How do we deal with this? Show people that you're interested, show people that you genuinely care, bring your passion, bring your personality. That's going to make a huge difference. So those are my parting words. We're all selling all the time, whether we like it or not.
Sounds good. And I really love what you said about, really, with networking, there's a person on the other end, right? So if you take the opportunity to care for that person, and care differs depending on the context, but if you actually take a look at, well, that person, how can I help them? How can I build a meaningful connection? How can I help them in the future? Then those relationships start to blossom a little bit sooner. And you'll find that even as an introvert, even someone who's not in sales, that you probably like it a little bit better, because most people at some level like other people, right? So I appreciate the time and for kind of buying into my my sales pitch for being on the podcast and sharing your insights. And
my pleasure.
Thanks so much, and hopefully, Frank, we'll have you back on a future episode.
Great. Always enjoy it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.